It seems my review of Salem's Lot is going to be quite an unpopular one. However, I am a fan of the novel. It's one of the books I've recommended on my blog as a must-read Stephen King book. It's also the book I recommend to beginners who are new to Stephen King's world. So if you've never read a Stephen King book, I do recommend starting with Salem's Lot. I do think it's a great entry point. However, what is new is the new book adaptation of this novel. It's now exclusively available on Max. And I have to say, I have some thoughts. Welcome back to the Biblio Lifestyle channel, where we're reading and living better together. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you're the first to know what's new when I go live and when new videos are uploaded. Today, I'm here to share my take on the new adaptation of Stephen King's classic vampire novel, Salem's Lot. Now, before we get into it, I have to give you some background on this film. Now, again, this is an adaptation of Stephen King's classic novel of the same name, Salem's Lot. This is a book I've read numerous times. I love it, and I believe it's a great gateway to Stephen King's world. So if you're new to King, if you've never read him, you need to read Salem's Lot. However, we're here to talk about the adaptation, which is exclusively available on Max. Now, this film was initially meant for a theatrical release. However, it shifted to HBO Max, and I think that shift in itself, not counting the delay, made fans really concerned. And I understand, because I was one of them. I was wondering, hey, why are they switching it from a theatrical release to streaming with the delay? I was like, what is going on? But for folks who are not familiar, the adaptation follows the story set in a small town in Maine. It's called Jerusalem's Lot. Now, if you spell Jerusalem, Salem is at the end. So it's often referred to as Salem's Lot. Now, we see this town being overrun by a very powerful vampire who slowly infects the townspeople, although quite honestly, it happened really fast in this film. And we see a band of residents kind of come together to combat this, right? And just all the evil that's being spread. Our main character is returning to the town, and he ends up being one of the people who are trying to fight against this. So that's what you can essentially expect. Now let's get into some of the positives of the film, because I like to start on a lighter note. So the first thing I want to mention is the music. Okay, we started off with Gordon Lightfoot's Sundown. And I have to be honest, I'm a fan of the song. So when I heard it, I was singing. Sundown, you better take care if I find you've been creeping round my back stairs. Listen, that is the song I blast when I'm on a road trip. I do love it. Now, even though this song is something completely different, and the fact that if you're creeping around someone's back stairs, especially here in the US of A, you're going to meet a bang bang. But in this case, it is more about the vampires who are creeping after sundown. So I thought it was appropriate, especially on the fact that it gave us that nostalgia. It's a song of the time. So I was like very happy with Sundown, you know, kind of bringing us into the film, but also closing us out. So that's one thing I want to say. Another win on the positive side that I want to share about this film is the classic vampire atmosphere. Now, the film really embraces the style of 70s and 80s vampire movies. So you're going to get the traditional horror aesthetic, right? As opposed to the more modernized version of vampire films. So some of the examples, let me get some clips up here, include the crosses, okay? I love seeing the use of the crosses, even though the cross did not work for our, priest here, because he clearly lost his faith. But I loved seeing that in the film, of course, the holy water and all the different things. It just really gives us a sense of nostalgia. Another thing I loved, which is, symbolic of the picture I have up there now, is just the horror elements. So some of the horror elements gave us the scary moments. So I love like the shots of the figures outstairs, right? I love seeing Danny kind of hovering outside Danny was trying to get Mark to open up the window and stuff like that. I love like these horror elements. I thought it was great. I loved in the beginning, we saw Danny with his brother Ralphie kind of walking in the woods. I know it might seem cheesy to some people, but I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was just, you know, genius. So I loved those elements as well. Okay, next up, atmosphere and cinematography. Now, the small town setting of the town, I really enjoyed that. So, you know, when you have like a downtown setting, I'm always appreciative of stuff like that. It was very well done. Another thing is going back to that forest scene. I know it might seem cheesy, but I really, really enjoyed it. The next thing is the house. I thought the design of the house was wonderful. It was very visually appealing. Now, I do have a negative for the house, so I'm going to save that there, but we're just focusing on the positives right now. Another thing that I thought in terms of strong performances, hands down, Mark. Mark was carrying this entire show on his back. Mark is a child, but he is so much more ready to take on the vampire. He's so brave. Mentally, he has, you know, the thought processes of an adult. So I felt like, you know, he was an old soul, but also one that was very brave. He was very intelligent as well. He clearly did his research. I love the comic book research on how to handle vampires. He was a character you really wanted to cheer for. So I felt he was just a very strong presence in the film. Another thing I want to bring up is the ending. I'm going to do a whole separate video on the differences between what you can expect in the book versus what you can expect in the film, how they are completely different. And this is a major difference, this ending. So again, if you want to see the differences between the book and the film, check out my other video. But a whole new third act gave what I felt something new to the film that we never had in the book. So by the movie deciding to give us the drive-in, you know, setting as the place for the final showdown, I thought it was brilliant because, again, it gave us something fresh and new to a story, especially for us fans, that is incredibly familiar. So that's kind of where I'm at on like the pros of the show. So let me know in the comments, what do you think were some of the highlights? What did the film get right? So again, for me, a quick rundown is I loved the Gordon Lightfoot song. That's just me personally. I love the classic vampire atmosphere. I love those classic elements, you know, the crosses, holy water, just the 70s and 80s vibes. For me, that was incredibly nostalgic. I also love the horror elements because we did have some scary moments. We had some really well-crafted sequences. I loved, again, seeing Danny hovering outside. That was really great. I love seeing Ralphie's abduction. I mean, you know, it was a very gruesome moment. But in terms of a horror film, I thought that did it really well. I love the small town setting. I love the house, the Marston house. Very well done. Of course, Mark carried the show. Okay, I have to put Mark back up there. Mark carried the show on his back. Very well done. And finally, the ending. The ending varies from the book, but I thought it was a great new added touch that gave us avid fans, if you're an avid reader, if you've read and loved the book, maybe you even watched the 1979 version, this gave us something new and this gave us something fresh. Okay, so now let's get into some of the negatives. Now, my first big negative is the fact that I felt the pacing was rushed. I felt like the story really lacked the depth that fans of the book might have been looking for. So that is my biggest criticism. The novel is so rich with lore and folklore and character development that the film was not able to represent properly. Now, I personally feel this happened because it was done in a really short time. So by that, I mean, we had an under 2-hour film. I think this could have benefited from even 30 minutes more. Ideally, it should have been a 3-hour film for me personally. So because of the short runtime and, you know, the fast-paced nature of what they gave us, unfortunately, there were many characters that were underdeveloped. And I know it would make it really hard for viewers to really connect with them. Whereas if you're new to it, you're not able to connect. You're just watching it and you're just like, it was okay. If you're a fan of the book, if you know these characters, you can't connect with the ones you're seeing on screen. It's impossible because you know completely different people from the book. So that, you know, I thought was a huge disservice. We needed a longer run time. Okay, my next question in terms of like negative is casting. Could we have done this better with a different cast? Now, personally, one of the characters I did not care for, and this is just me personally, I really didn't like the Straker character. He did not work for me. Richard Straker did not work for me. Now, yes, my gut's telling me a different cast could have brought the film to life in a different way. Like I said, I don't like the Straker character. He was my biggest disappointment. However, it kind of goes back to what I was saying. Maybe this same cast could have worked if we had a longer runtime. Now, what I also want to talk about is areas where there were missed opportunities or where the adaptation had missed potential. Let's put it that way. So my biggest thing, so even going from the fact that maybe casting could have made a difference, but I do feel maybe we could have gotten more from the existing cast with a longer runtime. I know it would have been a million times better if we had a limited series or a mini series or something with maybe 5 to 7 episodes. I've noticed lots of book to screen adaptations have gone this route, especially recently. Another recent book adaptation that I covered here on the channel was Lady in the Lake. And I thought, we had 7 episodes of that. And it was able to tell a more full story. I mean, obviously, there's still bits you're not going to get, but it felt more full to me. And even though we had a completely different ending, I was still here for it. I actually preferred the film's ending to the book's ending. But anyways, I think if, again, the series ran longer, if we had a mini series format, instead of trying to compress this novel in a 2-hour film, you know, folks are just not going to be as happy. So I completely get that. And then another missed opportunity, a missed chance for potential is the house. I thought we should have used more of the Marston house. If we used more of the house, I thought it would have been better. Another critique I have is that instead of having the showdown at the drive-in theater, we could have had it at the actual house. I wanted to see more of the house. I didn't get more of the house. That was disappointing for me personally. I wanted to see more of the house. I'm sorry, it's great. And in the book, we get a whole backstory on the house. So that's something I'll be talking about in further detail in my separate video about the major differences with the movie as opposed to the book. So those are just some of the things for me. So overall, all right, let's wrap this up. Overall, I do understand that this film will be both a disappointment for some folks, and I understand some folks also appreciating it for what it is. Now, as a vampire film, I do believe Salem's Lot is going to give you all that nostalgia if you love old school vampire and horror films. The atmosphere is there. It really is strong, and it gives us all the vibes. However, fans of the novel or the original miniseries, because I want to throw in those folks in there, the 1979 series, you might find that this adaptation is really lacking in depth. It's just very surface level, and you really don't get a lot of stories about the characters themselves. So my consensus on this is that Salem's Lot, the 2024 edition, would have been better suited as a mini-series, so we could really explore the story's complexities, we could get more character depth, we would learn more about the town and the history, especially revolving around the house. Maybe we could have gotten more character stories and other characters involved as well. And unfortunately, the rushed pacing, I think it really hindered what could have been a really great film. Even if we wanted to stick with the film format, an extra 30 minutes, an hour would have been amazing, because then we would have received more layers and more nuances to the story, especially for us fans of the book. So my verdict for Salem's Lot is simple. It's a decent watch for classic horror fans and vampire enthusiasts, but it may fall short for those looking for a faithful, dedicated, and comprehensive adaptation of Stephen King's novel. So I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's continue the conversation. What did you think of HBO Max's Salem's Lot adaptation? Did you watch the film? Did you read the book Salem's Lot? Let's continue the conversation in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Now, if you haven't already, now's a great time to like the video. It's an easy and free way to support me and the channel, but also hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you're the first to know what's new when I go live and when new videos are uploaded. Thanks for watching.